Dr. Robert Waldinger is a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development at Massachusetts General Hospital, co-founder of the Lifespan Research Foundation. He's done a thing. Biggest thing he's done, though, is come down to the basement to talk about happiness. He's got a brand new book where he talks about happiness and what truly makes us happy from the longest study on happiness in history. He took over the study a number of years ago, and we're going to hear from him about what truly makes us happy. And Dr. Bob Waldinger joins us. How are you?
I am good, and I'm really glad to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm happy you're here too. Obviously, anybody talking about happiness, that's what we're all after. I want to begin, Bob, with this 2007 survey of millennials that you have in the author's notes right at the beginning of the book, because I think especially for a money show, this really frames what we're after, maybe what we're not after. Do you remember that study? Can you tell me about it?
Oh, yeah. They surveyed thousands of millennials and asked them, what are your major life goals? And about 80%, 8 out of 10, said that their major life goal was to become rich. Not just to get their material needs met, but to become rich.
And what's interesting is, did they follow them, or have you seen the same thing in your bigger studies that people, when they're young, that's the main goal?
Yes, and some people, even when they're older, that the financial bottom line is the only metric they can imagine for having a meaningful, good life. And so that's what they stick to, but especially young people. And I think it's because we get these messages all day long from the culture that, if you have lots of money, if you buy these things, life will be good.
Yeah, well, that's what was surprising. Well, not surprising to me, I suppose. Frustrating to me was that it was also not just being rich, Bob. It was the trappings of being rich, right? You guys looked into that.
Oh, yeah. Material things. What we found actually was that when you use your discretionary income to buy material objects, you're less happy for less long than if you use your discretionary income to have experiences, particularly with other people. Going on a vacation with your family or tickets to a basketball game with a friend. Any of those things makes you happier for longer than buying the next flashy car or the next big screen TV.
Well, let's dive into exactly the project that you're involved, because this project is a hell of a lot older than you are. This project has been around for a good long time. Tell me about the project you're involved in.
It's 85 years old. It started in 1938, and it's the longest study of the same people that's ever been done. Started with teenagers and followed them all the way through to the end of their lives to look at what helps people thrive and what things don't make people thrive so much. And now we've expanded to all their children. So we're talking thousands of people over 85 years.
Is it not an accident that this began during the Great Depression time? Was that because it seems like that time when you say 1938, it seems like there was so much sadness then. Was that intentional at that point that we really need to see what makes people happy?
There was a lot of doom and gloom in the culture, but in addition, one of the arguments of the founders of this study was, we've spent so much time and so much money studying what goes wrong with people. Why don't we study what goes right with people? And so it was this kind of flipping it on its head to study normal development.
You write also in the author's notes, Bob, that a good life is a complicated life. And really defining a good life is complicated. Tell me, how is it complicated?
Well, what we know from all these life stories is that everybody has hard times. Everybody has hardship. Everybody struggles with things. And the reason why it's important to name that is that it's easy to look at other people, especially if you look at their social media posts and say, oh boy, everybody else is always at a beautiful beach, or they're always about to dive into a beautiful plate of food, right? And everybody else has life figured out except me. And what we can tell you from studying thousands of people is not true. Everybody struggles. Life is filled with hard times, and we would argue that's part of what makes life richer and more interesting for most of us.
It is so interesting that I'll go on social media myself and I find myself almost universally depressed afterwards. These beautiful people doing beautiful things all the time. And, I'm sitting in my house, which is, man, it's a nice place and I have a nice life, but turning that thing off, it seems to be so much better for me. You tell some great stories throughout the book of some of the subjects. Early in the book, you tell a story about Henry and Rosa. Can you give me a little snippet about them? Because I think this is just a good glimpse into the average person that you talk about, Bob.
Sure. Henry and Rosa were from the poorest neighborhoods of Boston in 1938. They were from actually one of the most disadvantaged, troubled sets of families. And
which then, Bob, and not to cut you off, but I just want to initially and culturally, I initially think when you say that for that first couple sentences, I think these people are going to be more unhappy. They're going to struggle more in their life, right? So their happiness meter is going to be way less if they're from this really poor upbringing.
Exactly. And Henry and Rosa are a great example of a couple who had a wonderful life, had a really rich, fulfilling life. And a lot of it had to do with their connections with each other. They had a very solid marriage and their connections with friends and family. And that what we find over and over again in studying thousands of people is that the people who had the warmest, richest connections were happiest, healthiest. They were also most successful at work.
Wow. So relationships really, would you say, the millennials said it was riches was number one, being rich. Would you put relationship then as number one if you had to look at your study so far?
I would say if you're going to do one thing in your life to try to have a good life, it would be invest in your connections with other people, that it has huge payoff.
Does this mean that the introverts have it harder, Bob?
No, but it's a great question. So in fact, introverts just need fewer people. They actually find being with lots of people exhausting, but they need people. They just need a smaller number of people. And that's not abnormal. It's not a problem. In fact, it's just fine.
On that note, we already opened up with one myth about happiness, this idea that money brings happiness. What are some other myths that you found over the years are associated with happiness that may or may not be true?
Yeah. Well, another big goal of those millennials that they surveyed was to become famous. Being famous doesn't make you happier. It doesn't make you less happy either. It's just neutral. And similarly, people thought that, boy, I need to achieve a lot at work. And one of the things we find is that work achievement doesn't predict whether you're going to be happy. In fact, when people were in their 80s, we said, look back on your lives and tell us what you most regret. And a lot of the people looking back on their lives said, I wish I hadn't spent so much time at work, and I wish I had spent more time with the people I care about.
Boy, that's big, especially for a show like ours. I feel like our listenership sometimes need to hear that because people obviously listen to a money show, money-oriented, know that spending more time at work sometimes can equate to more money. Tell me about correlations, though, with money and happiness. Where do the correlations actually lie there? Are there some?
There are some. So what we know is that you need to have your basic material needs met in order to be happy. So below, one survey said $75,000 annual household income. Below that, people are less and less happy. And the lower you go below 75K, the less happy you are. But the higher you get above 75,000, and the amount may vary a little bit, but the more money you make, your happiness doesn't really go up very much. So yes, you need your basic material needs met, and beyond that, money doesn't correlate with happiness.
Find it in other ways. What is the relationship between health and happiness?
strong relationships. So the other big finding of our study was that if you take care of your body, you're happier as well as obviously healthier. So what that means is getting that health care that you need to get, going for those checkups, getting regular exercise, not becoming obese, not abusing alcohol or drugs. All of those things really matter to keeping you both healthier and happier.
That's interesting. So is longevity then also tied to happiness?
Yes, people who are happier on average live longer. No one person can say, gee, if I'm happier, I'll live to be 100.
Yeah.
But on average, the people who have a greater sense of well-being stay healthier and therefore live longer.
We've seen studies before, Bob, about people that like feel like they have a mission in life, right? That they have something that they have to do. I'm thinking especially about one study where in a nursing home, half of the people living there were given a plant and they had to take care of the plant, make sure the plant stayed alive. The other half were just left to themselves to do whatever. The people that had to take care of the plant lived longer on aggregate than people that just were left to their own. Is there a connection then between purpose and happiness?
There is. And there's a connection between purpose and longevity. As you said, that the people who say, this is why I get up in the morning, this is what my life is about, are happier, stay healthier, live longer. And that could be anything. It could be taking care of a plant or a pet. It could be taking care of grandchildren. It could be mentoring your younger coworkers at the office. There could be so many purposes, but you want to have some sense of what means something to you and whether you can live out that purpose day to day. One of the big questions that retirees ask is, do I still matter? And what we know is that everybody wants to feel like they matter somewhere, somehow to somebody.
That's amazing. It seems like, too, for the older people in your life, just telling them they matter, like having those discussions, I think would be great for you and great for the older people in your life. I was wondering, we began by talking about the importance of relationships and about how relationships are number one. And we just talked about purpose. It would seem to me then that purposeful relationships, like working on building this purposeful relationship, more important than one that's just a get together and play cards. Is that true or not at all?
Not at all. It turns out you can have all kinds of different relationships, right? So yes, purposeful relationships, like together we're going to work on this project, great. It's actually one of the things that brings people together, volunteering for a political campaign or, to combat climate change or whatever your passion is. But there are also relationships where we just play cards together, we just go on hikes together. Those are absolutely as important, as impactful, as beneficial. There are all kinds of ways to have connections with other people, and they all work.
Which goes back to the complication, right? How complicated having a good life really is. That a fabric, I guess, of a real fabric makes a good life.
Yeah. And I think, to emphasize that point, that different kinds of relationships are really helpful. So we have some relationships that are for fun. We have some relationships where we help somebody or they help us. We have other relationships where we share our most important secrets and concerns. All kinds of different relationships are useful to us. And in many ways, what we want to be sure of is that we have a collection of different kinds of relationships in our lives, if we can manage that.
Is the word happiness too broad?
I think happiness is really a momentary feeling. If we think about, am I feeling happy right now? Yeah, I'm talking to you. It's fun. We're having a good conversation. But an hour from now, I might be really annoyed at something. I won't be happy. I won't be happy right then. So happiness is like an up and down thing. So I like to think about well-being, this kind of bedrock of things are okay. I've got the ingredients in my life that mean that things are generally okay, even when I'm annoyed, even when I'm having a bad day. It's a kind of safety net that we build that can make happiness more likely moment to moment, but that expecting to be happy all day long is a complete pipe dream. Nobody's happy all the time.
Yeah, much more about this overall satisfaction. I like your term well-being. I think way better. The is well-being then more of a mindset? I guess if I'm optimistic about my well-being and about the fact that things are going to be okay, have you seen that optimism actually breeds more contentment?
Optimism does breed more contentment, and it's not clear that we can control whether we're optimistic or not. Some of us are born more optimistic temperamentally, right? And, some of us are Tiggers and some of us are Eeyores, some of us are kind of gloomy and we see the glass as half empty all the time. And so we can't totally control it, but there are ways to reframe things. So, one of the things we know is that a gratitude practice actually makes us happier and feel better about our lives. So if I'm in a bad mood, but I think, okay, well, what do I have to be grateful for? It's really helpful to call those things to mind. Like, my wife, what would life be like for me if I hadn't met my wife? Well, it wouldn't be so good. What would life be like for me if I didn't have my close colleague, Mark, who I wrote this book with? Well, our research wouldn't have been nearly as good. So you think of the what if I hadn't had this in my life? And it can make you start feeling really grateful for your life. And that's a helpful exercise, especially when you're feeling kind of crummy about things.
You've done far more research than I have on this, but what's funny is that I've had this thought recently, looking back on my life, that the more gratitude I feel, the more grateful I am, the more riches seem to follow me. And maybe that is just a sense of well-being and happiness, because as I realize that I have friends around me, I have people around me, I have people that would take care of me if things go badly, that then I feel this well-being, which makes me feel a richness. I don't know if there's anything there scientifically, but it's certainly what you're saying rings true.
Yeah. And there is, if you think about it, if you smile at people, they smile back. They might make conversation. They might, if you walk into a room frowning, maybe just because you're concerned about something else going on in your life, but you walk into a room frowning, the message is, don't come near me. If you walk in and you're smiling, you're giving off that kind of energy, people respond. And so I think what you're saying is that you can kind of give off messages of, come approach me, or you can give off messages to stay away. And that makes a big difference in how easy it is for us to connect with other people.
It's funny, you saying that reminds me of another question I wanted to ask you that I nearly forgot, Bob, which was, there's a fascinating study you talk about a stranger on a train. And the setup for everybody is that you and I are sitting across from each other on a train. Do you make conversation or not? Or, even on an airplane. And generally, by the way, if the person next to me on an airplane starts talking, I'm like, oh God, no. Oh, please, please,
right.
Please, no.
Oh,
but
no.
This study showed something a little different, and it's not the same thing we were talking about, but a little related. Can you talk about the stranger on the train?
Absolutely. Some researchers got two groups of people who were about to take a subway train and gave them an assignment randomly. Some of them were assigned to do what they usually do, which is to keep to themselves, look at their phones, listen to music, read the paper, whatever they did. Other people were assigned to talk to a stranger while they were on the train. And they asked people, how much do you think you're going to enjoy this assignment we've just given to you? And the people who were assigned to talk to strangers uniformly said, we're not going to like this. Zero.
Right.
This is not going to be fun. So they went through, they did their assignments, and afterwards they asked them again, how much did you enjoy your train ride? The people who had to talk to strangers were way happier at the end and enjoyed it much more than the people who kept to themselves. And it's an indication that we're not always so good at anticipating what's going to be fun, what's going to make us happy. And that's useful to remember.
I love that because it brings up these surprises in life, these things that where you don't expect to get happiness, and then it's there. And I think about all the great conversations I've had on airplanes with strangers, even though I hate doing it. Go in. I've met some phenomenally interesting people on planes. Which brings me, I think, to my next question, which is you've obviously done this, not just this amazing project that the two of you have done with this book, but obviously the project that envelops so many more years. What has surprised you most, Bob? What has been the thing that's been the biggest, wow, I didn't see that coming?
Well, first of all, the importance of connection. I did not see that relationships would turn out to be so powerful. That loneliness would be as bad for you as smoking or obesity, right? So I didn't see that. I think the other thing I didn't see was how much people can change, how much our lives can change as we go through life. You think you see somebody's on a certain path and, their lives are going to be on this path the whole time. And then people make all kinds of changes, even late in life, even in their 60s and 70s and 80s. They might find love, or they might find a whole new hobby or a whole new group of friends late in life. So I think that one of the take-home messages that I find most hopeful is that we don't know how life is going to turn out, even if we think we know, and that all kinds of changes can happen throughout our lives.
I love this idea of the magic of a pivot, that things can change at any point, and it's never a time when you should, pack it in and give up, like the train is running out of the station. My last question today is this: what's the biggest takeaway? I asked you the biggest surprise. What's the biggest takeaway, or maybe a non-obvious takeaway, that you hope people get from this book?
The biggest takeaway is to be active in taking care of your relationships. Think of it like you would think of physical fitness. You don't go to the gym today and then say, okay, I'm done, I never have to do that again. Think of social fitness in that way. Think of taking care of your relationships as something you do every day, every week, rather than spending yet another weekend afternoon on my laptop doing my research work. I've started calling up friends and saying, let's go for a walk. Let's have coffee. That it's that active engagement with the people we care about that really pays off.
The book is The Good Life: Lessons from the World's Longest Scientific Study of Happiness, and it's available everywhere, I think.
Yeah, hope so.
Thank you so much for talking happiness here with us early in the year, Bob. I really appreciate it.
Joe, this was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.